On the day of my daughter's wedding, after I'd spent over $25,000 to give her a perfect ceremony, she took the microphone in front of 150 guests and called me human garbage. But what she didn't know was that I had in my possession all the evidence that she had been cheating on her husband with her personal trainer just 1 week before getting married. My name is Richard Sanchez. I'm 68 years old, and for decades I believed being a good father meant enduring anything for love. How wrong I was. It all started many years ago when my marriage to Isabel Vega became a silent battlefield. From the time my daughter Natalie was a little girl running around our house in San Diego, Isabel began her quiet campaign. Small poisonous comments whispered into our daughter's ear when I wasn't around. "Your dad doesn't have time for you. He's always working," Isabel would say as she braided Natalie's blonde hair each morning before school. "If he really loved you, he'd be home more." I'd arrive from work at 7 in the evening, exhausted but always eager to play with Natalie, to help her with her homework, to be the father my own father never was. But she would look at me with these reproachful blue eyes that I didn't understand. On weekends when I'd suggest trips to the park or the zoo, Isabel always had a perfect excuse. Natalie already has plans with her friends, or she's too tired from school. Years later, I understood they were calculated lies meant to create distance between my daughter and me. Oh! The situation worsened when Isabel and I divorced in 2015. Natalie was 20 then, an adult, but her mother's poison had been working for over a decade. During the divorce proceedings, Isabel convinced Natalie that I was to blame for everything, that I'd abandoned the family for another woman. The truth was completely different. It was Isabel who had asked for the divorce after years of constant arguments and manipulation. But I kept trying. I continued to pay for everything Natalie needed even after the divorce. Her apartment downtown, $800 a month in rent. Her private health insurance, $150 a month. An allowance of $1,000 a month so she could study marketing without having to work. Her car, a little white sedan I bought her for her 21st birthday. Her tuition at a private university, nearly $8,000 a year for 4 years. Despite all of this, every time I tried to get closer to her, Natalie treated me with a coldness that was unnerving. Her visits were mechanical forced. She'd come to my house on Sundays, sit on the living room sofa for exactly 1 hour, answer my questions with single-word replies, and leave saying she had things to do. She never told me about her life, her dreams, or her problems. It was as if an invisible wall stood between us, built brick by her mother's lies. In 2017, when Natalie was 22, she met Andrew Morales at a young entrepreneurs conference in Los Angeles. He was 29 and had just inherited his late father's fuel company, 3 gas stations in Southern California, with contracts with major shipping companies. It was a solid business, bringing in over $2 million a year. I remember the first time Natalie told me about him. It was a Sunday in March, one of those spring days in California, where the sun feels warm, but the breeze is still cool. We were on my deck sipping coffee after a tense meal as always. "Dad, I met someone," she said suddenly, and for the first time in years, I saw a real spark of excitement in her eyes. "Oh, tell me about him," I replied, trying to hide my joy that she was finally sharing something personal with me. "His name is Andrew. He has a chain of gas stations. He's very hardworking and ambitious," she said. And something about the way she mentioned the business before any personal qualities gave me a twinge of unease. But I wanted to believe my daughter had found love. I wanted to believe that maybe through this relationship we could rebuild our lost connection. When Andrew came for dinner for the first time 2 months later, I liked him immediately. He was polite, respectful, and intelligent. He spoke about his plans to expand the family business with genuine passion. He treated Natalie with what seemed like affection. For the next 6 years of their relationship, I was their unofficial financial grandfather. My relationship with Natalie remained at that uncomfortable distance Isabel had so carefully cultivated. But in 2022, something started to change in my daughter's behavior. The changes were subtle at first, then increasingly obvious to someone who had watched her for almost 3 decades. It was during one of our monthly dinners at my house, a Tuesday in February 2022, when I noticed the first clue. Natalie arrived with a brand new black designer handbag with gold hardware that must have cost a fortune. When I asked her about it, she said it was a small investment to feel good about herself. "Investment?" I asked as I served the paella I had made especially for her. "Honey, a handbag isn't an investment." And Dad, you don't understand these things. It's important to project a good image, especially now that Andrew is expanding the company. She replied in a strange tone as if she were repeating rehearsed words. A person and ducks are them. That phrase stuck with me, especially now that Andrew is expanding the company. She hadn't mentioned love, the happiness of being with him, or anything personal. Everything revolved around the company. In the following weeks, I began paying more attention. During our weekly phone calls, Natalie always steered the conversation toward Andrew's business achievements. He signed a new contract with a shipping company. He's thinking of opening a fourth gas station in Nevada. The business is growing by 20% this year. In April 2022, during a family barbecue at my sister Elaine's house, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill down my spine. Natalie was talking to her cousin Rose in the backyard, thinking no one was listening. I had gone out onto the patio to smoke my after-dinner cigar when I heard their voices from the other side of the hedge. "But do you really love him?" Rose asked, as direct as always. "Rose, love is such a romantic concept," Natalie replied with a laugh that sounded calculated. "Andrew offers me stability, financial security. Isn't that what every woman looks for? Besides, once we get married, I'm going to be part of all this. The company's been in both our names since last year." My hand trembled and my cigar fell to the tiles. The company was in both their names. Andrew had made Natalie a co-owner of $1 million business without them even being married. That wasn't love. That was pure manipulation. But what impacted me most was the cold, calculating tone my daughter used when she spoke of the man who was supposed to be her future husband. There was no warmth, no genuine emotion. She talked about him like she was talking about a business opportunity. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the signs I had ignored. Natalie's extravagant spending had increased considerably in the past 2 years. Designer clothes, expensive beauty treatments, costly vacations that Andrew supposedly paid for, but which I suspected were actually coming out of the company funds they now shared. No surrender one. Bury one. I also remembered something even more disturbing. In December 2021, Natalie had started talking about financial security obsessively. "Dad, it's important to have a financial cushion," she told me. "You never know when things can change." At the time, I thought she had matured, that she had developed financial responsibility. Now I realized she was preparing for her future at Andrew's expense. But it was her new routines that really set off all my alarms. In May 2022, Natalie started mentioning that she had a lot of extra work at the marketing agency. "Dad, I've been getting home very late lately, but we have some important projects." At first, I was proud of her dedication. However, something didn't add up. One afternoon in June, I decided to stop by her office to invite her to dinner. It was a Thursday at 7:30 p.m., one of those times when she was supposedly working late. The receptionist informed me that Natalie had left at 5 o'clock as usual. That lie hit me like a punch. If she wasn't working late, where was she during those hours? Who was she spending that time with, stealing it from Andrew and their relationship? It was then in July 2022 that I made a decision that would change everything forever. I needed to know the truth. I needed to protect this young man who, despite everything, had treated me with respect and kindness for years. Andrew didn't deserve to be cheated on, and if my own daughter was plotting something so devious, I had a moral obligation to find out. I contacted Thomas Navarro, a private investigator my lawyer had recommended years ago during my divorce. Thomas was 45. He was discreet, professional, and had worked on cases of both corporate and personal infidelity for over 20 years. "Richard, I understand your concern," he told me during our first meeting at his office. "As a father, you need to know if your daughter is being honest, both with her partner and with you, since you're financially supporting her." I explained my suspicions: the non-existent overtime, the excessive spending, the excessive interest in Andrew's business, that conversation I had overheard. Thomas nodded seriously. "I'm going to investigate her movements for the next few weeks. If there's something to discover, I'll find it," he assured me. His fee was $60 a day plus expenses, but I was willing to pay any amount for the peace of mind of knowing the truth. If I was wrong, I would be overjoyed. If I was right, at least I could make informed decisions about how to proceed. What Thomas discovered in the following weeks would forever shatter the image I had of my daughter and prepare me for the greatest humiliation of my life. The first weeks of August 2022 were an emotional roller coaster. Each day I waited for Thomas's call with new findings while I tried to maintain my normal routine and continue being the father who generously financed Natalie's life, even though every dollar I gave her felt like a stone in my stomach. The first report came on a Friday morning. Thomas had been following Natalie for 10 days, meticulously documenting her movements. The results were devastating. "Richard, sit down before you read this," he had told me over the phone. "Your daughter isn't working overtime. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when she's supposedly working until 9, she leaves her office at 5 and goes directly to a residence." My heart stopped. I knew that housing complex. It was where Mark Ortega lived, the personal trainer Natalie had hired a year ago to get in shape for the wedding. He was a 30-year-old guy, muscular, with an easy smile that made women lose their minds. "How long does she stay there?" I asked, already fearing the answer. 2 to 3 hours each time. She always leaves after 8, disheveled with wrinkled clothes. "Richard, I'm sorry, but there's no doubt what's going on in there." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a full hour, not moving, processing the betrayal. Not only was she lying to me, but she was cheating on Andrew in the most vile way possible. A man who loved her, who had put his company in her name, who planned to build a life with her. But Thomas wasn't done yet. In the following weeks, his discoveries were even more disturbing. He had intercepted phone calls between Natalie and Isabel, where they openly discussed their future strategy. In a recording from August 15th, 2022, I could hear my ex-wife's voice advising our daughter. "You have to secure your position before the marriage, Natalie. Make sure your name is on everything, the house, the bank accounts, the business contracts. Men can be very fickle after the wedding." And Natalie's reply sent another chill through me. "Don't worry, Mom. I already have 50% of the company. After the wedding, I'm going to convince him to transfer the house to me too. Andrew is so naive, he'd do anything for me." "And what about that trainer of yours?" Isabel asked with a knowing tone that turned my stomach. "Mark is just for fun. Mama release valve. Andrew is too formal, too serious." "A woman needs to know her way around," Natalie replied, laughing. That laugh, that cruel, calculating laugh, I didn't recognize as my little girl's. What had my daughter become? Thomas continued to collect evidence throughout September. In October, photographs of Natalie entering and leaving Mark's apartment, recordings of conversations where she planned her meeting times, records of expenses where she used money from Andrew's company to buy expensive gifts for her lover. The most bitter irony was that I was still financing this double life. The monthly funds I sent her for her apartment, her health insurance, all contributed to maintaining the lifestyle that allowed her to cheat on Andrew so comfortably. In November 2022, Natalie officially announced her engagement. Andrew had arranged a romantic dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in San Diego and had proposed with an engagement ring that must have cost at least $10,000, a 2-carat diamond solitaire that sparkled on her finger like a cruel joke. "Dad, I'm so happy," she told me on the phone that night, with an emotion I now knew was completely fake. "Andrew is the perfect man for me. We're going to get married next September. Is that month okay with you?" "Of course, honey," I replied, swallowing my bitterness. "Have you thought about the wedding budget?" "Well, Andrew says we can spend up to $30,000. But I was thinking, Dad, you've always been so generous with me. Could you help us with some extra costs? I'd be so thrilled to have the wedding of my dreams." Of course she was asking me for money. Not only was she betraying me, not only was she cheating on the man who loved her, but she also wanted me to finance the whole farce. "Yeah, how much do you need?" I asked, already, knowing I would say yes, because despite everything, she was still my daughter, and a masochistic part of me wanted to see how far she was capable of going. Well, with the church, the banquet, the flowers, the music, the honeymoon, we were thinking about $15,000 extra. "I know it's a lot, but don't worry, Natalie. Dad will take care of everything," I told her. I could hear her sigh of relief on the other end of the line. You're running out." That night, after hanging up, I poured myself a double whiskey and called Thomas. "I want you to intensify the surveillance," I said. "I need irrefutable proof of everything she's doing. Photographs, recordings, exact dates, times everything you can get legally." "Why do you need so much material?" he asked. "Because I'm going to finance this wedding, Thomas. I'm going to pay for every dollar she asks for, and when the right time comes, when she's gone far enough that she can't turn back, I'm going to show the whole world who Natalie Sanchez really is. For the next several months from December 2022 to August 2023, I continued playing my part as the proud, generous father. I paid for the church, the banquet at a luxury hotel, the most expensive photographer in California, imported flowers, a 12-piece orchestra, even the 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives that cost $8,000. Meanwhile, Thomas documented every encounter with Mark. Their last tryst was exactly 1 week before the wedding on September 2023. 3 hours in the trainer's apartment, leaving disheveled and with wrinkled clothes as always. That night, 1 week before her wedding, my daughter had betrayed the man she was about to marry for the last time, and I had the proof of everything. The day finally arrived September 9th, 2023. A sunny Saturday, perfect for a wedding, perfect for a farce, perfect for revenge. Once. September 9th, 2023 dawned with that perfect blue sky that only San Diego can offer in the fall. As I dressed in my dark gray suit, the one I had bought especially for the occasion, I couldn't help but smile ironically. I had invested more than $25,000 in this farce, and every penny would be worth it when everything came to light. The religious ceremony was scheduled for 5 in the afternoon. I arrived an hour early to supervise the final details and make sure everything was perfect for the big show. White flowers decorated every pew. The photographer positioned his equipment strategically, and the 150 guests began to arrive in their best attire. Natalie arrived in a white limousine I had rented for $500 for the day. She was radiant in her Italian silk wedding dress that cost $4,000 with a lace veil that had belonged to my grandmother. Seeing her so beautiful caused me a pang of genuine pain. For a second, my fatherly heart forgot everything I knew about her and only saw my little girl transformed into a stunning woman. "Dad, thank you for making this possible," she said, as we walked down the aisle, her arm intertwined with mine. "You don't know what it means to me to have you here walking me to the altar." Her words sounded sincere, but I knew the truth behind that perfect mask. Every step we took toward Andrew, who was waiting for us at the altar with a nervous and excited smile, was another step toward the culmination of her deceit. Tourney. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Andrew spoke his vows with tears in his eyes, promising to love and protect Natalie for life. She responded with beautiful words about eternal love and fidelity, words that made me nauseous, knowing what she had been doing with Mark just a week earlier. When the priest declared them husband and wife, applause echoed in the church. The camera flashes captured the moment of the kiss, and I applauded like everyone else, maintaining my role as the proud father until the very end. But it was during the transfer to the hotel that the first signs of what was to come began. The luxury bus I had hired to transport the guests was delayed for half an hour due to a mechanical issue. Natalie, who until that moment had maintained her composure, began to show her true temperament. "This is unacceptable," she yelled at the event coordinator, an older man who had organized hundreds of weddings without a problem. "My wedding has to be perfect. There can't be any mistakes." Andrew tried to calm her down. "Honey, it's only 30 minutes. The guests will understand." "You don't understand," she snapped at him in a voice that cut like broken glass. "This is my wedding, the wedding of my dreams. Everything has to be perfect." At the hotel, the problems continued. The air conditioning in the main ballroom wasn't working correctly. With 150 elegantly dressed people in a closed space during a hot California September, the temperature became unbearable quickly. "Fix that immediately." Natalie ordered the hotel manager with that authoritative voice I didn't recognize as my daughter's. "We paid a fortune for this place." The manager, visibly nervous, explained that they had technicians working on the problem, but it might take an hour to fix it completely. Natalie was furious, but the real disaster came when dinner was served. I had ordered prime ribeye steaks as the main course for all the guests, but due to a kitchen error, they had only prepared 80 portions instead of the 150 needed. "How is it possible that there's not enough food?" Natalie exclaimed when the chef discreetly approached to explain the problem. "Guests are going to be left without dinner at my wedding." The chef, a professional with decades of experience, suggested quick solutions, preparing an alternative chicken dish for the remaining guests or serving smaller portions of steak. But Natalie was beyond reason. "I want exactly what I ordered, 150 prime ribeye steaks. I don't care how long it takes." Andrew, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle his new wife was making, tried to mediate. "Honey, maybe we could accept the chicken solution. The guests will understand, and we can continue the celebration." Natalie looked at him with a fury that made me shiver. In that moment, I could see the real person hiding behind the mask of the perfect bride. Her eyes blazed with disproportionate rage. Her face was flushed and her hands trembled with anger. "You're failing me too," she yelled at Andrew in front of several guests who witnessed the scene. "This is supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be supporting me." Poor Andrew went silent, clearly humiliated by his wife's public outburst. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, and I could see some beginning to whisper about the bride's strange behavior. Meanwhile, I watched everything from my table, slowly sipping my glass of wine and waiting. Each of Natalie's outbursts, each moment of tension, was like a symphony to my ears. She was showing her true character in front of everyone, preparing the ground for what I knew was coming next. Finally, at 11 at night, after they had solved the food problem by serving a mix of steak and chicken and partially fixed the air conditioning, the dancing began. The 12-piece orchestra I had hired started playing, and the dim lights created a more relaxed atmosphere in the ballroom. The guests, relieved to finally be able to enjoy the party after hours of tension, headed to the dance floor. Natalie and Andrew opened the dance with a waltz they had rehearsed for months, and for a few minutes everything seemed to return to normal. But I knew the worst was yet to come. I could see it in Natalie's eyes and the way she looked at me from time to time, with that mix of resentment and contempt she had been cultivating for years. All the tension that had built up during the day had been just the prelude to what was to come. When the DJ took the microphone and announced that the bride wanted to address the guests, my heart raced. This was the moment I had been preparing for months. Natalie walked onto the small stage with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She took the microphone, her hands trembling with adrenaline and pent-up anger, and looked directly at where I was sitting. It was the moment of truth. "There are people you think will always be there for you, who you think love you unconditionally," she continued, not breaking her gaze from me. "But then you discover that it was all a lie, a facade to hide how selfish and petty they really are." The room fell into a heavy, uneasy quiet. The waiter stopped serving drinks. The musicians exchanged nervous glances. Andrew frowned, clearly confused by the direction his wife's words were taking. "Dad," Natalie said suddenly, pointing directly at me with her finger, while holding the microphone in her other hand. "I want everyone to know who you really are." My heart started beating so fast I thought everyone in the ballroom could hear it, but I maintained my composure, my face impassive, my hands resting calmly on the table. "I had been waiting for this moment for months. Everyone here thinks you're a generous father, a respectable man," she continued, her voice rising in volume. "But I know the truth. You abandoned our family when I was 8 years old. You left us without money, without support, without anything." The murmurs intensified. Some guests looked at me with surprise and disapproval. My sister Elaine stood up clearly, ready to defend my honor, but I gave her a discreet signal to stay quiet. "My mother and I had to make it on our own while you were out having fun with other women." Natalie shouted, her voice breaking with what seemed like genuine emotion, but which I knew was pure theater. "Years of waiting for you to come back. Years of waiting for you to be the father you promised to be." Andrew went on stage and tried to gently take the microphone from her. "Don't touch me," Andrew, Natalie yelled, pulling away from him abruptly. "This is something I need to say, something I've been holding on to for too long." She turned back to me, her eyes shining with tears. I didn't know if they were real or fake. "And now you show up here at my wedding pretending to be the perfect father, paying for everything to clean your conscience. But money doesn't erase what you did to us." The ballroom was in total shock. Some guests had started getting up, clearly uncomfortable. Natalie's friends looked at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. Andrew's colleagues seemed not to know where to look. "You are human garbage," Natalie finally exclaimed, pronouncing each word with a cruel precision that cut through the air like bullets. "Human garbage, that's what you are. A man who abandons his family and then tries to buy his forgiveness with dirty money." The silence that followed her words was deafening. 150 people held their breath, waiting for my reaction. Andrew had gone completely pale, looking between his wife and me, as if he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. But I didn't say a word. I stayed seated in my chair with my hands calmly on the table and smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it held years of accumulated knowledge about my daughter's true nature. Slowly, I stood up. My chair scraped softly on the marble floor. All eyes were on me, expecting me to yell, to defend myself, to cause a scene just as dramatic as Natalie's. Instead, I calmly walked toward my sister Elaine. I leaned in to kiss her on the cheek and whispered in her ear, "Take care of yourself. This has just begun." Then I walked with measured steps toward the back doors of the ballroom, the same ones the waiters had been using all night. My smile grew wider with each step. I could feel their eyes on my back, hear the murmurs beginning to rise, but I didn't turn around once. When I reached the doors, I paused for a moment and turned my head slightly. I could see Natalie on the stage still holding the microphone, her face a mask of triumph and satisfaction. Andrew had come off the stage and was talking urgently to some of his friends, clearly embarrassed by the spectacle his new wife had just put on. "Perfect," I muttered to myself, and I walked out of the ballroom. "Shida Brisser. As I walked through the hotel corridors toward the main exit, I pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Thomas and several text messages. "How did it go? Is the plan ready?" The last message read. I replied with a single word, "Begin." That night when I got to my apartment, I poured myself a 30-year-old single malt whiskey I had been saving for a special occasion. I sat on my deck looking out at the lights of the city spreading out before me like a tapestry, and I toasted in silence. To justice, I said aloud, raising my glass to the stars and to the consequences of our actions. The next day, the second phase of my plan would begin. Natalie had crossed the point of no return, and now she would have to face the consequences of years of lies, manipulation, and cruelty. She had completely underestimated her old man, thinking she could publicly humiliate me without repercussions. But as she was about to discover, Richard Sanchez was not a man who would be trampled without a response, and the response I had been preparing for months would be devastating. That night I slept better than I had in years, knowing that the time had finally come for the truth to be revealed. Always, Sunny. On Tuesday, September 12th, 2023, 3 days after the public humiliation at the wedding, I woke up at 6 in the morning with a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years. There was no trace of pain or sadness in my heart, only a cold, calculated determination that filled me with energy. Over breakfast, I mentally reviewed every step of the plan I had been perfecting for months. Thomas had given me a complete dossier with all the necessary evidence-dated photographs of Natalie's visits to Mark's apartment, recordings of compromising conversations with Isabel, bank records that showed how she had used money from Andrew's company to finance her extramarital affairs. My first action was to call my bank. I spoke directly with my personal banker, Carmen, who had known me for over 20 years. "Good morning, Carmen. I need to immediately cancel the automatic payment for the apartment on Fifth Avenue. The account number is 7601826, I said in a calm but firm voice. "Of course, Mr. Sanchez. Is there a problem with the property?" Carmen asked in her usual professional tone. "Let's just say there has been a change in family circumstances. The payment must stop immediately," I replied. "I also need to cancel the automatic payment for the private insurance company and the monthly $1,000 transfer to my daughter's account." Carmen was silent for a few seconds, processing the implications of my requests. "Mr. Sanchez, I understand these are sensitive matters. Are you sure you want to proceed with all these cancellations?" "Completely sure. Carmen and I need everything to be effective before the end of the day today." "Very well, sir. I will send you the confirmation documents by certified mail before 6 in the evening." My second call was to the travel agency, where I had booked and fully paid for Natalie and Andrew's honeymoon in the Maldives. The trip was scheduled to begin on Thursday, September 14th, just 2 days away. "Good morning, my name is Richard Sanchez, and I need to immediately cancel reservation number ML849 for 2 people at the resort," I explained to the customer service agent. "Let me check your reservation, Mr. Sanchez. I see the trip starts the day after tomorrow. Unfortunately, cancellations with less than 72 hours notice carry an 80% penalty on the total value." "I don't care about the penalties," I replied firmly. "I want a complete and immediate cancellation, and I want the guest to be officially notified that the reservation has been canceled by the original payer." "Understood, sir. The cancellation will be processed immediately, and a notification will be sent to the guest's registered email address." The third call was the most satisfying of all. I contacted the private health insurance company, where I had a family policy that had covered Natalie for over 10 years. "Good morning, this is Richard Sanchez, policy number SA3. I need to immediately remove my daughter Natalie Sanchez from the family coverage," I informed the representative. "Can you indicate the reason for the change, Mr. Sanchez?" the employee asked. The beneficiary no longer meets the family requirements to maintain coverage. I replied with cold legal precision. The change must be effective immediately. Understood, sir. The change will be processed today and the new policy without the beneficiary will be active as of tomorrow. As I was making these calls, I received several text messages and missed calls. Some were from my sister Elaine concerned about what had happened at the wedding. Others were from relatives and friends who had witnessed the spectacle and wanted to hear my version of events. But the message that interested me most was from Thomas. Richard Andrew is trying to contact you. It seems he wants to talk to you personally. I decided to ignore all communications for the time being. My plan required that the first consequences of my actions be felt before any conversation or explanation. At 2 in the afternoon, as I was having a quiet lunch at my favorite restaurant, I received the first desperate call from Natalie. Dad, what have you done? She yelled on the other end of the line in a hysterical voice that was music to my ears. The bank called me saying they canceled the rent payment, and the travel agency says our honeymoon is canceled. Good afternoon, Natalie. I replied with deliberate calm as I cut into my steak. How's your first day of marriage going? Don't give me that sarcasm. Explain what's going on. She continued to yell, her voice breaking with desperation. You see, honey, after your beautiful speech on Saturday night, I've had time to reflect on our father-daughter relationship, I said, slowly savoring every word. And I've come to the conclusion that you were right. I am human garbage. And human garbage shouldn't be financing the life of people as successful and self-sufficient as you. But Dad, I didn't mean to. She began to stammer, her tone changing drastically from anger to pleading. Oh, but I think you did mean it, I interrupted her. In fact, you said it in front of 150 witnesses. It was very clear and very public. And you know what, Natalie? You've liberated me. You've liberated me from the obligation to continue financing the life of someone who considers me human garbage. Please, Dad. It was the stress of the wedding. I was nervous. I wasn't thinking clearly. She pleaded, all her previous arrogance gone. Stress is a curious thing, I mused aloud. It makes people show their true character, and you showed yours very clearly on Saturday night. But the honeymoon, Andrew is devastated. He says his friends are laughing at us, she cried. Oh yes, Andrew, I said with feigned concern. Poor guy. It must be so uncomfortable for him that his brand new wife put on such a spectacle at their own wedding. I really should talk to him to apologize for raising such an expressive daughter. Don't you dare talk to Andrew, Natalie exclaimed, and I could detect genuine panic in her voice. Why not, honey? Is there something you don't want him to know about you, I asked with studied innocence. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for several seconds. I could hear her ragged breathing. I could imagine her mind working frantically, trying to calculate what I knew and what I didn't know. Dad, please, she finally said in a small broken voice. Can we fix this? We can talk like adults. I apologize for what I said. It was out of line. Oh, Natalie, I sighed dramatically. Apologies are beautiful, but actions have consequences. And you, my dear daughter, are going to learn that lesson in the most direct way possible. What do you mean by that? She asked in a voice that was barely audible. I mean that your comfortable dad-funded life is officially over. From now on, you and your husband will have to make it on your own, like the independent and successful couple you clearly are. But Dad, you can't do this. I'm your daughter, she cried desperately. Yes, you are my daughter, I agreed. But you are also a 28-year-old married woman who just publicly demonstrated that she doesn't respect or value me. So now it's time for you to prove that you can fend for yourself. I hung up the phone and turned it off immediately. I knew she would try to call me obsessively for the next few hours, but I needed her to feel complete desperation before proceeding with the next phase of the plan. That afternoon, I completed all the banking and legal procedures. By 6 in the evening, Natalie had officially lost her subsidized apartment, her health insurance, her monthly allowance, and her dream honeymoon. But this was just the beginning. The real bomb was about to explode, and when it did, it would destroy not only her marriage but the entire life of lies she had built. Tuesday, September 13th dawned gray and rainy, as if the San Diego weather wanted to match the mood I knew would soon invade my daughter's life. As I had my coffee and toast for breakfast, I watched the raindrops slide down my kitchen window, each one carrying with it another fragment of the facade that Natalie had built for years. At exactly that morning, I dialed Thomas's number from my landline. His voice sounded alert and expectant when he answered on the second ring. Richard, I've been waiting for your call. How do we proceed with the second phase, he asked without preamble. It's time to contact Andrew. I replied with the same determination I had felt the day before. But I need you to do it anonymously, just as we planned. Use the prepaid phone you bought last month. Understood. Should I send him the photos by email first, or would you prefer I speak to him directly? The call first, I decided after a few seconds of thought. He needs to be emotionally prepared for what he's about to see. If we send him the evidence without warning, he could react impulsively and ruin the whole process. Thomas had experience handling delicate situations as a private investigator. He knew exactly how to dose the information to maximize the impact without causing unnecessary collateral damage. We had rehearsed the script for the conversation several times in the preceding weeks. What time should I call him? Thomas asked. At 11 in the morning, late enough for him to be at his office, but early enough for him to have the entire day to process the information I calculated. And remember, you have to sound like someone who genuinely cares about his well-being, not like a blackmailer or a vindictive person. Of course, I'll introduce myself as someone who has important information about his wife and who prefers to remain anonymous for personal safety reasons. I hung up and went to my study where I had organized all the evidence Thomas had compiled for months. The photographs precisely dated of Natalie entering and leaving Mark's building at times that coincided exactly with her supposed overtime. Records of telephone calls between her and the personal trainer, invoices from expensive restaurants paid for with Andrew's corporate card during romantic outings that weren't with her fiancé. The most devastating piece of the puzzle was an audio recording that Thomas had gotten from a contact at the gym where Mark worked. In that recording dated September 5th, 2023, just 4 days before the wedding, Natalie could be heard clearly talking on the phone with a friend. No, of course I don't love Andrew in that romantic, intense way, her voice said, with a coldness that had chilled me the first time I heard it. But he's stable, he has money, and he put me down as a co-owner of the company. After we get married, I'll have full access to all the accounts. It's a long-term investment, you understand. And then came the part I knew would completely destroy Andrew. Mark is something else entirely. With him, I feel real passion, authentic chemistry. It's what I need so I don't go crazy in a marriage that's so practical. At 11 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Thomas confirming that he had just finished his conversation with Andrew. How did he react? I asked immediately. Exactly as we expected, Thomas replied in a tone that mixed professional satisfaction with genuine compassion. First shock, then denial, then anger, and finally a kind of desperate resignation. He asked me to send all the evidence to his personal email. Did he mention anything about confronting Natalie immediately? I advised him not to do it until he had reviewed all the evidence. I told him he needed to be completely sure of the facts before making any irreversible decisions. He agreed to wait until tomorrow. Perfect, I murmured, feeling the puzzle pieces fit together exactly as I had planned. Send him all the material this afternoon, photographs, recordings, financial records, dates, times, everything. That afternoon, as Thomas was preparing the package of evidence that would destroy my daughter's marriage, I received several more calls from Natalie. Her tone had evolved from the hysteria of the day before to something more like calculated desperation. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, she began in her fourth call of the day, trying to sound reasonable and mature. You're right to be upset with me. My behavior at the wedding was unacceptable and unjustifiable. I'm glad to hear you've had time to reflect, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. I've talked to Mom about all this, she continued, and I could tell she was following some kind of prepared script. She's made me see that I've been directing my frustration toward the wrong person. You've always been there for me, financing my studies, my apartment, helping me when I needed it. Oh, yes. And what does Isabel think about your behavior on Saturday? I asked with genuine curiosity. Mom says that maybe I've been influenced by her resentment toward you for too long, she admitted in a small voice. She says it's time for me to form my own opinions about our father-daughter relationship. Interesting. Isabel was trying to do damage control, probably fearing I might reveal some of the conversations Thomas had recorded, where she advised Natalie on how to financially manipulate Andrew. I find that very wise of your mother, I commented dryly. And what are your plans to demonstrate this new maturity and perspective? Well, I was thinking we could have lunch together tomorrow, Just you and me to talk like adults. And so I can apologize properly for my behavior. Tomorrow might be complicated. I lied deliberately. I have several important commitments I can't cancel. Please, Dad, she exclaimed, and all her carefully constructed composure instantly collapsed. I need to talk to you. Things with Andrew are tense since what happened at the wedding. Tense in what way, I asked with feigned paternal concern. He's acting strangely distant. Last night he barely spoke to me, and this morning he left for work without having breakfast with me, which he never does. Of course he was acting strangely. He had just received devastating information about the woman he had married just 4 days earlier. He was probably going through all the stages of emotional grief. Maybe Andrew is also processing what happened at the wedding, I suggested with false compassion. It must have been very uncomfortable for him to witness that exchange between us. Exactly, Natalie exclaimed, grasping onto that explanation like a lifeline. That's why I need to fix things with you. If he sees that you and I have resolved our differences, maybe things will go back to normal. I understand your logic, I said slowly. But Natalie, some words can't be taken back. Some actions have permanent consequences. But Dad, I'm your daughter, she cried desperately. You have to forgive me. Family is family. Yes, I agreed in a soft voice that deliberately contrasted with her hysterical tone. Family is family, and families support each other, respect each other, and love each other unconditionally. Don't you think so? Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. Then help me understand something. Natalie, I continued in the same calm tone. If family is family, if mutual respect is so important, why did you choose to publicly humiliate me instead of talking to me privately about any resentment you might have? The silence lasted for several seconds. I could hear her uneven breathing on the other end of the line. I don't know what happened to me, she finally murmured. It was like all the pressure that had built up for years just exploded all of a sudden. Pressure that had built up for years, I repeated. Are you referring to the pressure of accepting my financial support while secretly despising me? No, that's not it, she protested, but her voice sounded less convincing than before. Then explain it to me, Natalie. Explain how someone who respects and loves me as family can hold so much resentment for so long and then use it in the cruelest way possible at the most public moment possible. Another long silence. This time when she spoke, her voice was broken and small. I don't have a good explanation, Dad. I just know I was wrong and I would do anything to undo it. I know, honey, I said, with a genuine tenderness that surprised even me. But some things can't be undone. You can only face the consequences and learn from them. What does that mean for us? She asked in a voice that was barely audible. It means that tomorrow is going to be a very important day for you and Andrew, I replied mysteriously. And after tomorrow, we can talk about how to rebuild our relationship on a completely honest foundation. I hung up the phone knowing that in less than 24 hours, Natalie's carefully constructed world would crumble completely. Sorry, Wednesday, the September 14th, began with a deceptive calm that reminded me of those moments of absolute silence that precede the most devastating earthquakes. As I had my morning coffee on the deck, watching the first rays of sun light up the rooftops, I knew that somewhere in the city, Andrew Morales was reviewing the complete dossier he had received from Thomas the day before for the third or fourth time. At 8:30 in the morning, my phone vibrated with a text message from Thomas. Target has confirmed receipt of the material. Emotional response visible even through email. Requests an urgent meeting to clarify additional details. I smiled as I reread the message. Thomas's professional precision had always impressed me, but in this particular case, his ability to maintain emotional distance while handling such explosive information was exactly what I needed. I replied immediately. Authorize the meeting. Neutral location. Coffee shop across from the park at 10:30 a.m. Maintain partial anonymity until you assess his emotional state. As I dressed to go out, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of anticipation and melancholy. On one hand, I was about to witness the definitive collapse of the structure of lies my daughter had built for years. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore that an innocent young man was about to see his dreams of matrimonial happiness destroyed by the person he trusted most. It's similar to we are once. At 10 o'clock, I strategically positioned myself in a cafe across the street from the meeting spot where I could clearly observe the meeting between Thomas and Andrew without being seen. I ordered a drink, although I knew I probably wouldn't touch it. Andrew arrived 5 minutes late and his appearance shocked me. The confident, elegant young businessman I had known for years had transformed into someone unrecognizable. His suit, usually impeccable, was wrinkled as if he had slept in it. His eyes were red and puffy, showing a night of insomnia and tears. His hair, normally styled with gel, was disheveled and dirty. Thomas was already sitting at a discreet table in the back when Andrew entered the cafe. I could see the investigator half stand to greet him, pointing to the empty chair in front of him. Andrew sat down with mechanical movements, like an automaton. Although I couldn't hear the conversation, the body language of both men told me everything I needed to know. Thomas spoke with measured gestures and a serious expression, occasionally pointing to a manila folder he had placed on the table. Andrew nodded compulsively, his hands visibly trembling, as he looked through documents he clearly recognized as authentic. At one point, I saw Andrew put both hands to his head, holding it as if he wanted to keep it from exploding. His shoulders shook in a way that left no doubt that he was crying silently. Thomas leaned forward, talking to him in what seemed to be a consoling but firm tone. The meeting lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it was over, Andrew shook Thomas's hand with an expression that mixed desperate gratitude with deep pain. He left the cafe walking like a man who had just received a terminal diagnosis. Natalie, 31. 20 minutes later, Thomas met me at my location. "How did it go?" I asked without preamble, although his expression had already given me the basic answer. Devastated but grateful, Thomas replied, sitting down across from me. At first, he tried to deny the evidence, looking for alternative explanations for each photograph, each record, each recording. But when I played him the audio recording from September 5th, his facade completely crumbled. The recording where she talks about the marriage as a long-term investment? Exactly. He immediately recognized Natalie's voice, and when he heard the part about Mark being her real passion, he started to cry uncontrollably, Thomas said with a grave expression. He told me that over the last few months he had noticed changes in her behavior, but he had attributed them to the stress of organizing the wedding. What kind of changes? Physical coldness, lack of interest in conversations about the company's future inexplicable expenses that she justified as personal investments. He also confessed that for their planned honeymoon, she had insisted on having separate rooms to keep the romance alive. That information surprised me. Even I, with all my mistrust of Natalie's motivations, hadn't imagined she would go so far in her calculating coldness. "Did you give him any advice on how to proceed?" I asked. "I recommended he consult with a divorce lawyer before confronting Natalie, especially because she is listed as a co-owner of the company and might try to claim half the assets in case of a separation," Thomas explained. "I also suggested he discreetly gather all the important financial documents before she realizes he knows the truth." "Did he mention anything about talking to me?" "Yes, he asked me insistently about my identity and how I had obtained all that information. I told him I have reliable sources who prefer to remain anonymous, but that all the material was compiled for his protection, not out of vengeance toward her." He partially believed it. He's a smart man. He suspects someone close to the family's involved, but right now he's too emotionally shattered to investigate that connection. At noon, as I was having lunch at home, I received the first hysterical call from Natalie. "Dad, Andrew is acting completely strange," she screamed without even saying hello. "This morning he left the house without telling me where he was going, and when I tried to call him, it went straight to his voicemail." "Maybe he has important work to attend to," I suggested with false tranquility. "The first few days after a wedding can be stressful for young entrepreneurs." "No, this is different," she insisted in a voice bordering on hysteria. "Last night he didn't touch me once. We were in the same bed, and it was as if I were invisible." "Natalie, maybe you should talk directly with your husband about these concerns," I advised her in a paternal tone. "Honest communication is the foundation of any successful marriage. I've tried to talk to him, but every time I ask what's wrong, he looks at me in a way that scares me," she confessed, and I could tell her panic was completely genuine. Scared of what I asked with morbid curiosity, like, like he's discovered something terrible about me and is just waiting for the right moment to confront me, she murmured in a trembling voice. And is there something terrible he could have discovered, I asked with studied innocence. The silence that followed my question lasted for almost 30 seconds. It was a silence charged with guilt, fear, and the horrible realization that her worst nightmares might be coming true. Dad, why are you asking me that? She finally replied in a small, scared voice. Because if you're worried your husband might have discovered something terrible that suggests there is something to discover, I replied with relentless logic. I haven't done anything wrong, she exclaimed, but her protest sounded desperate and unconvincing, even to herself. Then you have nothing to worry about, I concluded with a calm that I knew would drive her crazy. Honest marriages survive any misunderstanding. Dad, I need you to help me, she pleaded, abandoning all pretense of dignity. If Andrew is thinking of doing something drastic, I need your support. I need you to talk to him and explain that our family isn't what it seems. And what exactly should I explain to him, I asked with genuine curiosity. That I love you. That what I said at the wedding was due to stress. That we're a normal family with normal problems. Natalie, I said in a soft but firm voice, I cannot lie to your husband about the nature of our relationship. It would be profoundly dishonest to him, and he deserves the complete truth about the woman he has married. What do you mean by the complete truth, she asked, in a voice that was barely audible. I mean that if Andrew has questions about your character, your honesty, or your ability to be a faithful and committed wife, I am not going to lie to protect you from the consequences of your own decisions. The gasp of horror that escaped her throat confirmed that she had understood the message perfectly. Dad, please, she whispered. I'm your daughter. Yes, I agreed. You are my daughter, and that is precisely why I am not going to let you continue living a life built on lies and manipulation. It's time for you to face the truth about yourself, Natalie, and it's time for Andrew to know that truth too. He's going to ask me for a divorce, she cried desperately. That I replied with a coldness that surprised even me will be his decision, and whatever his decision is, it will be the right one for him. I hung up the phone and turned it off immediately, knowing that the next few hours would be crucial and that I could not allow Natalie's desperate pleas to make me waver in my resolve. Spring was 17. The dominoes had begun to fall, and there was no way to stop the chain of events that I myself had set in motion. Thursday, September 15th, 2023 will be a date I will remember forever, not only for being the day the truth finally emerged from the shadows, but for being the moment I witnessed a life built on a foundation of deceit collapse with the force of a demolished building. At 7 in the morning, my phone rang with the insistence of a fire alarm. It was Elaine, my sister, who rarely called me so early unless it was something urgent. Richard, what the hell is going on? She asked without preamble, her voice filled with worry and confusion. Isabel just called me hysterical, saying that Natalie is having a nervous breakdown and that you have something to do with it. Good morning, Elaine, I replied with deliberate tranquility as I poured my first cup of coffee. What exactly did Isabel tell you? She says that Andrew came home last night with a folder full of photographs and documents, that he confronted Natalie with accusations of infidelity, and that she's completely shattered, Elaine said quickly. She also says you've cut off all the financial support you were giving her, and that they suspect you're behind this whole situation. And what do you think about all this? I asked, genuinely curious to know my sister's perspective. Elaine was silent for several seconds before replying. Richard, I've known my niece since she was born. I also know the kind of mother Isabel has been all these years. And most of all, I know you. If you've reached the point of completely cutting off contact with Natalie, it's because you've discovered something truly serious. Her intuition had always been sharp, and once again she had hit the nail on the head with surgical precision. Elaine, over the next few days, many different versions of this story will circulate, I explained carefully. I ask that you keep an open mind and judge the facts when you have all the information available. The facts include that Natalie has in fact been cheating on her husband, she asked directly. The facts will speak for themselves, I replied, avoiding specific details. But I assure you that everything that is happening is a direct consequence of decisions that Natalie made freely for months, if not years. At 9 in the morning, Thomas called me with the report of the nighttime confrontation between Andrew and Natalie. Richard, Andrew contacted me last night after he talked with his wife, Thomas, began in a professional but understanding tone. He has authorized me to share the details of what happened with you, considering that he strongly suspects your involvement in all this. How did the confrontation unfold? I asked, mentally preparing myself to hear details I knew would be devastating. Andrew got home at that evening with all the documentation we had provided him. He found Natalie making dinner, acting completely normal. He asked her to sit in the living room because he needed to talk to her about something important. Thomas narrated with cinematic detail. How did she react initially? At first, she tried to maintain her composure. When he showed her the first photos of her entering Mark's building, she claimed they were normal personal training sessions. But when he played her the audio recording from September 5th, her facade completely collapsed. I could vividly imagine the scene: Natalie listening to her own voice, describing her marriage as a long-term investment and confessing her real passion for Mark. The horror and shame she must have felt upon realizing that her most intimate and treacherous words had been captured and documented. What arguments did she use to defend herself? I continued asking. Initially, complete denial. Then she claimed the recording was taken out of context, that it had been a hypothetical conversation, that she had never had serious intentions of cheating on him, Thomas detailed. But when Andrew showed her the financial records of the romantic dinners paid for with company money, the gifts bought for Mark, the hotel reservations, her entire defensive strategy disintegrated. And then she changed tactics completely. She started to cry hysterically, saying she had made a terrible mistake, that she was confused by the stress of the wedding, that Mark meant nothing to her. The investigator continued. She begged for his forgiveness, promised to cut all contact with the trainer. She even offered to give up her share of the company as a gesture of good faith. How did Andrew respond to these pleas? With a coldness that surprised me coming from someone so young, Thomas admitted. He told her that the problem wasn't just the physical infidelity, but the calculating and deceitful nature of her entire behavior. He specifically mentioned the recorded conversation where she talked about the marriage as a financial transaction. That response filled me with a strange mix of pride and sadness. Pride because Andrew had shown more moral fortitude than I had expected. Sadness because a 35-year-old man had to mature brutally in a single night. What was his final decision? I asked, although I already knew the answer. He told her the marriage was over, that he couldn't continue living with someone he had completely lost trust in. He gave her 24 hours to leave the house they shared and informed her that he would immediately begin divorce proceedings. How did the conversation end? Natalie had a complete panic attack, hyperventilating, uncontrollable crying, threats of self-harm. Andrew had to call Isabel to come and take care of her. He left the house and slept at a hotel, Thomas concluded. At 11 in the morning, my phone started ringing insistently. It was Natalie using Isabel's phone because I had blocked her number after our conversations the previous days. "Dad, please pick up," she yelled immediately, her voice shattered by hours of crying. "It's all over. Andrew is leaving me. He says he's going to file for divorce." "Natalie, take a deep breath," I told her, with a calm that contrasted dramatically with her hysteria. "Tell me exactly what happened." "He knows everything," she sobbed uncontrollably. "He has photographs, recordings, documents. He knows about Mark. He knows about the dinners. He knows everything about the company money." "And is what he knows true?" I asked with deliberate softness. "That doesn't matter now," she yelled desperately. "What matters is that my marriage is destroyed, that I'm going to lose everything. The house, the company, my reputation, Natalie." I observed with a clinical coldness. "It's very interesting that your first concern is material loss. Aren't you worried about the pain you've caused? A man who loved you?" "Of course I care about Andrew," she protested, although her tone suggested otherwise. "But Dad, I need your help. I need you to talk to him. I need you to explain that I can change." "Change what exactly?" I asked. "Everything. My behavior, my attitudes, my mistakes," she stammered. "I can completely cut off contact with Mark. I can give up my share of the company. I can do couples therapy, whatever it takes." "Natalie, do you really believe Andrew can ever trust someone who has proven to be capable of maintaining a double life for months?" I asked her, with brutal honesty. "But people can change," she insisted desperately. "I can show him I'm different, that I can be the wife he needs." "The wife he needs, or the wife you need to be to maintain your lifestyle," I countered. The silence that followed was telling. Even in the midst of her emotional crisis, Natalie realized she had revealed too much about her true motivations. "Dad, please," she finally murmured in a broken voice. I'm your daughter. You can't not help me at the most difficult time of my life." "Natalie, I've been helping you for 28 years, I replied with genuine sadness. I've given you money support, unconditional love, second chances, third chances, but I can't help you escape the consequences of your own decisions when those decisions have deeply hurt innocent people. But I'm going to lose everything, she cried hysterically. Yes, I agreed simply and directly. You are going to lose everything you have built on lies, and that loss is going to be your opportunity to discover who you really are when you don't have others' financial security propping you up. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to support myself? She asked with genuine panic. You are going to do what millions of adult people do every day, I replied. You're going to find a job, you're going to rent an apartment you can afford, you're going to pay your own bills, and you're going to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions. I can't do it alone, she sobbed. Then it's time for you to learn, I concluded. Because Natalie, for the first time in your adult life, you're going to be truly alone. Without my money, without Andrew's money, without your mother's manipulation, just you facing the reality of what you've created. I hung up the phone and turned it off immediately, knowing that the next few hours would be crucial and that I couldn't allow Natalie's desperate pleas to make me waver in my resolve. The dominoes had begun to fall, and there was no way to stop the chain of events that I myself had set in motion. That afternoon, Andrew called me directly for the first time since this whole situation began. Mr. Sanchez, he said in a mature voice, he didn't have a week ago. I think it's time we talked. The conversation with Andrew that Thursday afternoon was one of the most difficult of my life, not because of conflict or confrontation, but because of the depth of pain I could hear in the voice of a young man who just a week earlier had been my son-in-law and had represented to me the hope that my daughter could find genuine happiness. Mr. Sanchez, I need you to know that I don't hold a grudge. Andrew began in a controlled voice, but filled with emotion. I understand you acted to protect me from a situation that could have gone on for years without me finding out. Andrew, first of all, I want to apologize to you, I replied with absolute sincerity. Not for having revealed the truth, but for not having warned you before you got to the altar. I knew what Natalie was doing, and I should have found a way to inform you before you married her. Why didn't you, he asked without reproach, only with genuine curiosity. Because I needed to be completely sure of my suspicions. Because I needed irrefutable evidence that couldn't be denied or misinterpreted. And if I'm honest with myself, I wanted Natalie to go so far in her deception that she couldn't justify her actions as minor or momentary mistakes. I admitted, I understand your position, he replied after several seconds of reflection. Although I must admit that part of me would have preferred to know the truth before saying my vows. What are you going to do now? I asked, changing the subject to more practical matters. I've already contacted my lawyer. I will begin divorce proceedings tomorrow for proven adultery. I have all the necessary documentation thanks to the investigation you commissioned. Andrew explained with a determination that impressed me. I am also going to initiate the legal process to reclaim the business ownership I gave Natalie. My lawyer says it won't be complicated considering we have documentary proof that she used company funds to finance her extramarital relationship. That constitutes misappropriation of assets. And what are your long-term plans? I'm leaving the country, Mr. Sanchez, he announced with a firmness that allowed no discussion. I have business offers in Chile that I've been considering for months. It's the perfect time to expand the company internationally and leave all this behind. His decision filled me with unexpected sadness. For years, Andrew had been like the son I never had. His departure represented not only the end of his marriage to my daughter, but also the loss of a relationship I had deeply valued. When are you planning to leave? I asked. As soon as the legal aspects of the divorce are resolved. My lawyer estimates that with all the evidence available, we could have a resolution in less than 3 months. He calculated. By January 2024, I hope to be settled in Santiago. Andrew, I want you to know that I will always consider you a part of my family regardless of what happened with Natalie, I said with genuine emotion. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. That means a lot to me, he replied, and I could tell he was holding back tears. You have been more of a father to me in these years than my own father was before he passed away. After that conversation, I was left to reflect on the ruins that remained after the explosion. A marriage destroyed, a young businessman forced to exile himself from his country, a fragmented family, and at the center of it all, my daughter facing the most devastating consequences of her life. For the next 6 months from October 2023 to March 2024, I watched from a distance as the complete collapse of the life Natalie had built unfolded. Isabel periodically informed me about her condition not out of genuine concern for my emotional well-being, but because she needed me to understand the magnitude of the crisis in order to manipulate me toward a reconciliation. Richard, your daughter has been living on my sofa for 2 months now, Isabel told me during one of our most tense phone calls. She can't get a job because she's in psychological treatment for severe depression and panic attacks. The medications have her in a state that barely allows her to function day to day. Is she getting proper professional help? I asked because, despite everything, my paternal instinct had not completely disappeared. Yes, she's seeing a doctor twice a week, but the doctors say it's going to be a long process, Isabel explained in a tone that oscillated between genuine concern and calculated manipulation. She's tried to look for work, she's gone to several interviews, but when employers ask her about the gap on her resume after her failed marriage, she breaks down emotionally. Besides, the divorce scandal has spread through professional circles in San Diego. Her reputation is destroyed, Isabel detailed cruelly. In February 2024, 5 months after the initial collapse, I received information that Andrew had finalized all legal procedures and had permanently left for Chile. He had completely recovered his business ownership, sold his properties in California, and cut all ties to his old life. Darian. It was then in March 2024 that I made the decision I had been considering for months. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and betrayal, despite the public humiliation I had suffered, Natalie was still my daughter, and as a father I had a responsibility to offer her a chance at genuine redemption. I called her directly on her mobile phone one Tuesday afternoon. Her voice when she answered was unrecognizable, flat, drained of energy, like someone who had completely lost hope. Natalie, it's Dad, I said simply. The silence that followed lasted for almost a full minute. I could hear her uneven breathing. I could imagine her processing the shock of receiving my call after 6 months of complete silence. Dad, she finally murmured, and that single word contained years of pain, regret, and desperation. I want you to come to my house on Saturday afternoon. We need to talk, I said in a tone that allowed no negotiation. Are you going to give me another chance, she asked in a voice so small and vulnerable that it reminded me of the 8-year-old girl she had been before Isabel began her work of manipulation. I am going to give you the opportunity to earn a second chance, I corrected her carefully, but it will have very specific and non-negotiable conditions. And if you fail at any of those conditions, it will be the last conversation we have in our lives. I'll accept any condition, she replied immediately without even asking what they would be. Saturday at 4 in the afternoon. Come alone. No Isabel, no lawyers, no intermediaries. Just you and me talking like adults about how you can rebuild your life from scratch. I explained. I'll be there, Dad. I promise, she said with a determination I hadn't heard in her voice for years. After hanging up, I sat on my deck watching the sunset and reflecting on the conversation we would have in a few days. It would not be an easy or emotional reconciliation. It would be a rigorous contract between a father who had learned to set boundaries and a daughter who needed to learn the most basic lessons about responsibility, honesty, and personal dignity. The conditions I would impose on her would be severe but fair continued psychological treatment, a stable and honest job, complete financial independence, and a sustained demonstration for a full year that she could live as a person of integrity and responsibility. I knew it would be the most difficult year of Natalie's life, but I also knew it could be her only real chance to become the woman she had always had the potential to be before lies and manipulation completely corrupted her character. Saturday would determine if my daughter was truly willing to do the work necessary to earn a second chance, or if she had forever lost the ability to genuinely change. Saturday, March the 16th, 2024, arrived with that characteristic golden light of a California spring that had witnessed so many decisive moments in my life. As I prepared coffee for two for the first time in 6 months, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of nervousness and determination. This conversation would define not only the future of my relationship with Natalie, but also whether she truly had the capacity to transform herself into a different person. At exactly 4 o'clock, I heard my doorbell ring. When I opened the door, I struggled to recognize the woman standing in front of me. Natalie had lost at least 20 pounds. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail without any styling products. She was wearing a basic t-shirt and worn jeans that she had probably bought at a thrift store. But the most shocking thing was her face. It had lost all the arrogance and petulance that had characterized her personality for years, replaced by a genuine humility I had never seen in her. "Hi, Dad," she said in a soft voice, keeping her gaze low, like a child who knows they've done something terribly wrong. "Natalie, come in and have a seat in the living room," I replied in a neutral tone, gesturing toward the sofa where we had had so many superficial conversations for years. She sat on the edge of the seat with her hands clasped in her lap, waiting for me to take the lead. Her body language clearly communicated that she understood the gravity of the situation and had no intention of trying to manipulate or control the conversation. "Before we start, I want you to understand something fundamental." I began, sitting in my favorite armchair across from her. "This isn't a conversation between a father who automatically forgives his daughter. This is a conversation between two adults, where one of them must prove that she deserves a second chance after having completely betrayed the other's trust." "I understand, Dad," she murmured without looking up. "Do you really understand, Natalie? Because for 28 years, you've lived with the security that no matter what you did, there would always be someone to rescue you from the consequences. Your mother when you were a child, me when you were a teenager, and young adult Andrew when you got married. That safety net no longer exists." I explained with a clarity that allowed for no misunderstandings. "Say you aren't an Asimekum." I know she replied, and for the first time she looked up to meet my gaze. "These past 6 months have been the most difficult of my life, but also the most educational. I've had to face who I really am when I don't have anyone else's money propping me up." "Tell me exactly how you've been living," I asked, needing to know the concrete details of her experience. "Since January, I've been working at a shoe store called Miranda Shoes on Main Street." She began her story with an honesty that surprised me. 8 hours a day, Monday to Saturday, selling shoes to tourists and locals for $900 a month. "It's exhausting. My feet are constantly aching, and some customers treat me like I'm invisible." "And where do you live?" "I rent a room in a shared apartment for $300 a month. I share a kitchen and bathroom with two college students who are half my age." She continued without drama, simply stating the facts. "I cook my own meals, wash my own clothes, pay my own bills for the first time in my adult life. How do you feel living like this?" "At first it was horrible," she admitted, with an honesty that moved me despite my emotional defenses. "I cried every night for the first few weeks. I felt humiliated, furious, as if the world had treated me unfairly. But my doctor helped me understand that those feelings came from a mentality of entitlement that I had never questioned." "Are you still in psychological therapy?" "Yes, 2 sessions a week with Dr. Carmen at the University Hospital. I pay for the sessions with my own money, $120 each, which means a significant part of my salary goes to treatment." She explained with a mathematical precision that showed she had learned to manage a real budget. "But it's necessary. I've had to unlearn behavior patterns that I developed over decades." "What kind of patterns?" "Emotional manipulation, compulsive lying, the feeling that I deserve things without working for them, the inability to accept responsibility for my actions," she listed with a self-awareness she had never demonstrated before. "I've also had to face the fact that I treated Andrew as an object, not as a person with his own feelings and rights." Her mention of Andrew made me feel a pang of renewed pain. "Have you had any contact with him since he left?" "No. And I shouldn't," she replied immediately. "My doctor explained that any attempt to contact him would be a way of continuing my manipulative patterns. He deserves to build a new life without interference from the person who betrayed him so deeply." "And what about Mark?" "I cut all contact with him immediately after Andrew confronted me," she said in a firm voice. "I changed my workout routine. I avoid places where I might run into him. I deleted his phone number." That relationship was a symptom of much deeper problems in my character that I have to fix before I can have any kind of healthy romantic relationship. "Natalie, I need to ask you a very direct question," I said, preparing for the most difficult part of our conversation. "Do you truly understand the magnitude of the damage you caused not only to Andrew but to our whole family? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" She was silent for several minutes, and I could see her mentally processing the question. When she finally answered, her voice trembled with genuine emotion. "Alrids, to my num. Dad, these last few months I've had time to review every decision I made over the past years. I've understood that I not only betrayed Andrew, but I used you as a personal bank, while secretly despising you. She began tears streaming down her cheeks. I've understood that humiliating you at my own wedding was the cruelest and most unforgivable act I could have committed. Keep going, I urged, needing to hear everything. I've understood that I ruined the life of a good man who genuinely loved me, that I destroyed our family's reputation, that I wasted every opportunity you gave me to be a better person. She continued sobbing. And I've understood that nothing I can do now can undo that damage. I can only work to become someone different so that I never cause so much pain to the people I love again. And are you willing to do that work regardless of whether I decide to forgive you or not? Yes, she replied, because I've finally understood that becoming a better person isn't something I do to get forgiveness or benefits. It's something I have to do out of moral responsibility to the people I've harmed and to myself. For the next hour, we established the specific conditions for her possible redemption. She would continue working in honest jobs that she paid for with her own effort. She would maintain her complete financial independence for a minimum of 1 year before accepting any economic help from me. She would continue in psychological therapy until both she and her doctor considered that she had completed her personal transformation process. Most importantly, she would have to demonstrate with consistent actions for 12 months that she had developed genuine empathy, honesty, and personal responsibility. There would be no immediate emotional reconciliation, no automatic forgiveness due to family ties. Mara Dixon 1%. Natalie, I want you to understand that our relationship will never be what it was before. I explained. At the end of our conversation, too much has happened, too much of trust has been lost. But if you prove over the next year that you have truly changed, we can build a different relationship based on mutual respect and complete honesty. I understand, Dad, and I accept those conditions, she replied with a determination that sounded authentic. Then I will call you once a month to check on your progress, no more, no less. The rest is completely up to you, I concluded. As she left that afternoon, I remained on my deck reflecting on the strange sense of cautious hope I felt for the first time in almost a year. I had seen something in my daughter's eyes that hadn't been there for decades, genuine humility and the determination of a person who had finally hit rock bottom and was willing to climb her way up from there. Suryi went mom. Today, 8 months after that conversation, Natalie is still working at the shoe store, still living independently, still in therapy, and still fulfilling every one of the conditions we established. Our relationship is different, more formal, less emotional, but also more honest and respectful than it had ever been. I have learned that being a father doesn't mean protecting your children from the consequences of their actions, but rather teaching them that all decisions have consequences and that true love sometimes requires allowing the people we love to face the hardest lessons in life. Natalie lost a marriage of fortune, a reputation, and years of financial comfort, but she gained something she had never had the opportunity to discover: who she could be when no one else was propping her up except for herself. And I learned that sometimes the most perfect revenge isn't the destruction of your adversary, but giving them the opportunity to become a better person than they ever were.